Jacqueline Munster.
Here, look. Imagine a government that was elected by the people wholeheartedly endorsed a voluntary code of practice on the transfer of mortgages, which was drawn up by the central bank itself and considered this to be best practice. Your Minister Noonan, Finance Minister at the time, had said, notwithstanding its voluntary nature, I expect that best practice dictates that the code be applied by all institutions to all classes of residential property. Now imagine again that this government, given all that's happening right across the state, still favour such a light touch approach to regulation, despite the fact that these banks caused the economic crash, they destroyed our economy and left the people to pick up the tab, a tab that we'll be paying for decades to come. And you knew and you know that this code of practice on the transfer of mortgages meant nothing and means nothing. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on. You knew the very first line of the code, a loan secured by the mortgage of residential property may not be transferred without the written consent of the borrower. You knew that meant nothing. By virtue of the fact that it was voluntary, there was nothing to force the banks to abide by it, and your government didn't see fit to bring in legislation to stop these banks from selling off family home loans to unaccountable vulture funds, and you still don't. The families, the very people that you were elected to protect, the families behind these loans and their families behind these loans, Minister, just don't feature in Fine Gael land. Just 3 months ago, a state bank that had been bailed out by the Irish people announced that it was selling over 6,000 family home loans to an unknown entity, loans belonging to families that had been engaging with the banks, and many had never missed an agreed payment, and again you did nothing. You sat there smugly and you turned a blind eye, and you continue to sit there while family home loans are being sold off to these unaccountable vulture funds, ignoring the suffering of these families. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're not, but you ought to be. And that is why Sinn Féin brought forward this bill, to stop these banks from selling off loans to these unaccountable vulture funds. And every TD in this bubble that has a modicum of conscience should do the right thing and support this bill. No consent, no sale.